So I'm in the middle of watching one of my childhood favorites, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So I won't keep this too long. I'll basically pause the DVD because I came across a post on Facebook that actually I think makes a good video topic, and I'll just do it now while it's on my mind. So this guy had actually seriously posted a question, which was, um, if democracy is the basis of morals, then was what Hitler done wrong? As he was democratically elected. Well, that's what the poster claimed anyway. Well, let's just start with that first of all, because it's really a fallacy. Um, I was checking out a few of the guy's posts, and it became clear fairly soon that he was an Islamic convert. He had a non-Islamic name, pretty normal sounding name, but I mean normal in the sense, the name. Um, and it just became obvious what his agenda was. He also tried to say, oh, well, once slavery was supported, once, all these terrible things were supported, and that's true, they were. But let's just start with the Hitler thing, because this is something I've seen come up a number of times. Let's be very clear, Hitler was no Democrat. Um, 1930s Germany, this is basic elementary history. It was hit hard by the Great Depression. The German people were suffering badly. Um, and whenever you have economic stagnation, you have the rise of political extremes. Now, the Great Depression was the worst economic recession of modern history. We may actually surpass it now, but only time will tell if that happens or not. But, in that environment, a charismatic orator like Adolf Hitler is going to get a lot of support. So there's no question that there was genuine support, popular support for Adolf Hitler among the German population. That's irrefutable. And there has been an attempt by some Germans post-war to sort of frame it as they were victims of the Nazi tyranny. They were all forced into it, and it's a little bit of revisionism because there was genuine support for the Third Reich, certainly in the early years. That's not to say it was universal, and that's the point. Hitler used to street thugs to intimidate people at the polls. The sort of tactics that the Third Reich used in those early years can hardly be called the actions of a democratic party. So it's a fallacy to say that it was democratic. It was popular, but there's many examples of totalitarian regimes that enjoy popularity. Xi Jinping enjoys a good degree of popularity because the mechanisms of the Chinese state mean that only pro-communist information is out there. And a lot of Chinese associate support with the Communist Party with support for China. It doesn't mean it's democratic and it doesn't mean it's right. So I really think it's false equivalency to say, or it's a fallacy. It's just actually wrong to say that this was just standard democracy. Oh, well, he was just voted in. That it totally ignores the fact that there was a significant amount of street thuggery. I mean, today when we look at elections where there is intimidation, voters, they're generally regarded as not free and fair. It's the same principle with the rise of Hitler and Mussolini earlier. So it's just nonsense to say my batteries are running low. I'm going to have to switch location slightly. It's just a fallacy to try and suggest that this is trying to keep the screen straight as I do this. Yeah, it's just a nonsense. Anyway, the poster then went on to attack secularism. To be honest, this is probably warranting a video in its own right, but I'll just include it in this one for now. I've seen this argument from a lot of Islamists and occasionally Christian fundamentalists, but predominantly Islamists and converts. And their logic is this: secularism is unlimited, it allows anything. Therefore, in their distorted view, secularism enables drug abuse, it enables crime, it enables prostitution, it enables X, Y, and Z. This is very skewed thinking because in secular societies you have laws, you have limits. So this notion that you get from Islamists that secularism simply allows everything is just a complete fallacy. It's nonsense. It does permit things that they don't approve of, for example, homosexuality and gender equality, and certainly in secular societies, for the most part, for the most part, there is far more progressive thinking from the general populace. As for the issue with slavery and well, that's one that's often coming up. Slavery enjoyed widespread support. There's no escaping that in the 18th century. The fact is, in cities like Liverpool and Bristol, powerful slave traders made the compelling argument that if the slave trade was outlawed, then there would be economic stagnation. And technically, they may have been right because it was a major part of the economy. That's why people like William Wilberforce and Elidu Oquiano struggled for so long for abolition to take hold. But ultimately, it passed because public attitudes changed. And this is a very, very important thing. Public attitudes change over time. There's attitudes we had in the 18th century that we'd find appalling now. Some of the things that went on there really were brutal. And before, the further back in time, the more brutal it becomes. So every generation you know, take for example the burning of so-called witches. That was seen as normal in the late 16th, early 17th century. But by the 18th century, that had been sort of shunned out because people were getting more enlightened with science. By the 19th century, it was, already archaic. So to sort of make these historical comparisons without considering that attitudes change over time is ridiculous. Some might argue there's things that are accepted today that 100 years from now we might look back on. I'll give an example. Reality TV, I think, is profoundly cruel and nasty. And I do hope that 100 years from now we look back and shun it. And that might even happen a lot sooner with the number of scandals there's been. Now, for myself, I have taken the side that it's a predominantly negative thing. I accept, although I don't like the fact that it enjoys widespread support. But the point is, things do change over time, and that is definitely a cause for optimism. But anyone that opens up a thread by saying, "Was what Hitler done wrong?" I would seriously question the moral judgment. Or even if you want to leave morality out of it, I would question the practical judgment because it failed. It actually failed as a doctrine, as an ideology, because the world stood up to it. I mean, not before millions of people have been killed, but these false equivalencies just need to be challenged. So, to the Islamists out there, secularism is not about saying anything goes. It's not about a society of hedonists who just do whatever they want. Secularism has limits. The point about secularism is it's saying we will not have a situation where organized religions impose their dogma onto everyone else. The sheer hypocrisy of Islamists and their useful idiots and converts, I just find pretty pathetic because they want all the freedom that democracy gives, and yet they routinely attack democracy because it's supposedly un-Islamic. So they've got really, really skewed thinking. Um, it's the same mentality that Western communists have. They praise Stalin and Mao, and they the honest ones will, but they they don't choose to live under a communist state. They choose to live in the decadent West. There's so many hypocrites out there. I think it was Churchill who said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. Think about that. The point being, democracy is very flawed. Democracy, you will find many vices within democracy. You will find crime. You will find prejudice. You can point to a lot of things. But something you cannot escape is that within democracy, there is a transparency that you do not get in totalitarian states, a greater transparency. Is it perfect? No. But in democracy, you have a free press, you have the values of freedom of expression, you have certain things that are deeply enshrined. And when those things are coming under threat, that's why people get concerned. And that's why they get vocal. If we do perceive that freedom of expression is under threat within a democracy, that's why people get very angry. The problem is not democracy. The problem is that democracy is fragile. That's what people need to understand. I'll round this up.